right, time to see what Season 5 can do. Oh, I feel that extra power. Yeah, there it is. If this is the future of motorsport, sign me up. Formula E has been around for 4 years now. When the series launched, it promised an early look at the future of motorsport. All-electric racing that was free of emissions but still full of excitement. Instead, what we got felt a little bit half-baked. 10 teams entered that first season, all of them racing cars that were exactly the same. Cars with less horsepower than a Honda Civic and range so limited they had to change cars mid-race. Open-wheel formula racing is supposed to be the pinnacle of motorsport. But those first seasons, they came up a little bit short.
For year 5, there's hope. New teams, new technologies, and most importantly, new cars. Cars with more power, more range, and a shape that is absolutely jaw-droppingly gorgeous. See what I mean? This is the Audi E-Tron FE05, and with cars like this, Formula E is finally starting to look like the future. Far more simple than the overwrought designs you see on modern F1 grids, the new Formula E car looks like something that escaped from Wipeout. Despite appearances, these cars will stay very much on the ground, where they'll have to live up to the standards set by last year's car, the championship-winning FE04. Helming the team is none other than Alan McNish, 3-time Le Mans winner and former Formula One racer, a man who knows a quick car when he sees it.
All right, Alan. Walk me through the cars. Let's start with the Season 4 car.
Well, if we go to this is the Season 1 to Season 4 car. And as you said, it is a spec car in a lot of ways. Spec chassis, spec aerodynamics, spec tyres, spec most of it except the electric drivetrain. However, in the first season, it was a spec electric drivetrain as well, with 150 kilowatts of power. So in reality, not a heck of a lot of power.
Which is about 225 for our American viewers.
When we entered as Audi into Season 4, we developed that up to a maximum of 200 kilowatts in qualifying. But as ever, motorsport, you need to move on.
And so we move on to the new car. Now, probably one of the biggest limitations of this car was mid-race changes, but that goes away with the new Season 5 car.
Yes, here we basically have got double the energy into the battery, and that allows us to go the full 45-minute race without the car change. Now, the car change was quite interesting though, because it was a sporting dynamic of the race that actually allowed you an opportunity to sort of play around with some strategies. And so now we've got a thing called attack mode, just to replace that. And attack mode means we will go with an extra amount of power for a period of time, which is determined by the organising body and given to us just before the race starts. So, you know, there's going to be a bit of strategy involved there.
A little bit of gamification there, right? It's messing up things a little bit, making things more interesting, or is that maybe a little playing with the results too much?
I don't think it's playing with the results, because it's the same for everybody. So it does give everybody the same opportunity, but it means that the guys that are going to be ahead of the game, they're going to take advantage.
So this car looks radically different than the Season 4 car, and in my opinion, a whole lot better. But aerodynamically, what's changed here?
Well, you're right, it has, and it starts at the front. We've got now covers over the front wheel arches, the fenders there. It's still got the nose traditional in a very similar way to this, but then when you come back to the back of the car, you can see it quite simply. This has got a rear wing, this doesn't. However, this has got this huge diffuser here to produce some downforce, but the principle of the championship isn't about producing downforce, it's about producing efficiency.
And this is the kind of aero that a lot of people have been pushing for in Formula One too, to get rid of the rear wing and really open up the rear of the car to allow cars to race more closely too.
Ultimately, in a street racing series, we've got quite a tight, compact circuit, and so we do need to be racing close to wheel, and I can tell you they are very much wheel to wheel.
And you mentioned spec bodywork and still spec chassis, but a lot is able to be changed by the teams here too, right?
In here, right underneath here, we have got our electric motor, our inverter system, our gearbox, our differential, and our rear suspension. So that's the area of very much focus. So there's the hardware aspects of it, but at the same time, it's the software that we can then develop through the season. Because this championship, you homologate this car before you start the year. And then once it's homologated, you can't change it. out, we've got another 25% increase of power. So in qualifying, we'll be at 250 kilowatts in Season 5.
Which I think is 340 horsepower-ish, something
Yes,
like that. So
it
that's
is.
some pretty serious numbers we're talking about. And the weight is a little bit higher in this car as well, but still pretty light.
Yeah, the weight is 900 kilos, so about 2,000 pounds. And principally, the battery, even though it's got double the energy, is slightly heavier. And also, we've got the new Formula One style halo system. So the tyre is an all-weather tyre. That tyre has still got to be robust enough to deliver the performance through the whole 45-minute range.
And only 8 tires for the race weekend, right?
Only 8 tires for the race weekend, so it means that when you drive the car, you're going to have to be careful with the throttle, because one thing about the electric motor, instant torque. And with E-Tron, we've been developing that instant torque, but also developing in the drivability.
So talking about drivability, that makes me think of the E-Tron road car, which is coming to market next year. Is there any link between this thing and what you'll be able to buy at the end of 2019?
The Motorsport arm has always been there in advance of what's been coming to the production line. One area that we've been able to learn a lot about, and this is an example of a crossover of technology, is actually regeneration of energy under braking. And that you normally would lose, but going back into the battery. And so in races, we recuperate just maybe a bit over 20% of our energy.
Okay.
But the E-Tron will recuperate about 30%. So therefore, there's been an understanding of how you can actually use that lost energy and improve it. And that will give you much, much better mileage when you're actually driving your E-Tron.
Now, I know you're going to let me out to play in both these cars. You're going to make me start in last year's car. Or what do I need to know? What do I need to watch out for?
Well, they're very different, the two cars. I would have said this one is quite raw in its way.
Okay.
What I think you have to be careful here is when you put combined load into the car. So when you're braking and turning in, then that rear, you've got to be careful, because again, we're regenerating the energy into the battery. If we go to the FE05, because of the brake-by-wire systems and because of the way we've developed the software as well, this car is a little bit more connected. However, you have got more power. You can spin up these rear wheels, and once you spin them up, and be careful at the next one, because it's easier to spin up again. So it's, I would say, right foot gentleness in this car, and probably left foot braking gentleness in that car.
All right. I can't wait to go.
It's all about your dancing feet.
Oh, I got good dancing feet.
After a few introductions to the team, a bit of pedal fitting, and a quick rundown of all the buttons on that lovely carbon fiber steering wheel, it was time for me to make a somewhat awkward entry into the narrow cockpit of the FE04 and hit the track.
Oh, it sounds like I'm taking off. This is cool. All right, here we go.
Heading on the pits in the Formula E car for the first time. I confess to being a little bit nervous in this one because everyone has told me how likely this car is to spin under braking. The steering is very light and there is zero brake feedback at all. Feels like I'm stepping on a brick. This is a very interesting circuit. A lot of different types of asphalt, a lot of surface imperfections. Actually, it compares pretty closely to a lot of the other Formula E circuits out there, most of which are on city streets. Now I know it only has about 250 horsepower, but boy oh boy, it's got a lot of torque. And no traction control other than my right foot. The other thing that Alan McNish warned me about was the breakaway characteristics of these tires. They're a street tire, so I expected that they'd have a pretty big slip angle, that I'd really be able to kind of get things sideways if I wanted to, but apparently that's actually not the case. It's a windy, blustery day here in Mallorca, but I am snug as a bug in a rug in this thing, lying flat on my back, strapped in tight. I am actually pretty comfortable, I gotta say. Wrapped in a carbon fiber blanket that costs more than my house, but we won't think about that too much right now. I can actually hear the tires talking back to me, which is not something I'm used to when driving a race car. Incredibly nimble. You can really hustle it through that chicane very quickly. Very confidence inspiring, actually, surprisingly so. Okay, time to head into the pits. Boy, it's nice to have a bunch of guys waiting for you in the pits. I could get used to this. That was a lot of fun. It was more exhausting than I thought. The steering is light, but still requires a lot of upper body strength to keep this thing moving. As ever with EVs, it feels like it's got a lot more horsepower than it does because it's got so much torque. But honestly, I'm ready for a go in Season 5.
And then, the moment I'd been waiting for. I've already said how good I think the new car looks, but of course, none of that matters if it's awful to drive. I could not wait to strap in and find out.
All right, time to see what Season 5 can do. This is my first time driving in a car with the Halo device, which is this kind of thong flip-flop looking thing over my head here. And from the outside, I know they look like they take up a lot of view, but actually from in here, I don't even really notice it. Right in front of me, it's only maybe the width of my thumb. Ergonomics of the Season 5 car are pretty similar to the first, but my elbows are actually even tighter in than before, so I'm having to use my fingers and my wrists even more to steer than I did in the Season 4 car. Season 5, we got a little more weight, good bit more power, more advanced suspension system, which I'm told will make this car much nicer to drive. And I can immediately feel the difference, even just through the first few corners. It feels so much more planted. Honestly, maybe even a little bit less fun to drive, but it does feel much quicker than before. Oh, I feel that extra power. Yeah, there it is. Oh, it does feel so much more planted under braking. Really secure. Steering weight, maybe a little bit heavier in the new car. But overall, this feels like a big step forward. As you'd expect, a 5-year newer car with a lot more development from Audi in the rear end. Still has that great point and squirt feeling of the first-gen car. Dive through the chicane, rear kicking out a little bit there. Over all these different asphalt imperfections, bumps everywhere. Just feels very, very planted all the time. If this is the future of motorsport, sign me up. Now I know a lot of people are going to rag on the sound of these cars because they don't sound like a screaming V10. And I miss those days too, but you got to be honest, those days are gone and they're not coming back. And frankly, I love the sound of this car. I think it sounds absolutely amazing. It sounds exactly what I imagined a car from the future would sound like when I was a kid. And I gotta tell you, I feel so incredibly lucky to be driving this today.
Yes, that was a bit of emotion you might have picked up in my voice there. This was one of those special experiences that don't come along every day, at least not unless you're a professional racer. No, this isn't the fastest race car on the planet, but it is certainly one of the most exotic, and one that I think will hold major significance in the long run of motorsport history. To say that I felt privileged to drive it doesn't begin to tell the story. And as if that weren't enough, having Alan McNish waiting in the pits for a post-stint debrief, this is properly special stuff.
All right.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
58-0.
Does that mean I get a contract for the season? Are you looking for any drivers?
We need to have a look at you, and we'll need to look into the data. How was it from your point of
It
view?
felt much more composed, much more planted, really solid, really
From
good.
the chassis point of view relative to the FE04?
Yeah, definitely, and under braking a lot more stable as well. To be able to hear which end was breaking loose just was one more element of feedback that I'm not used to. So that was really nice, and I love the sound of electric motor and the the reduction gear set and how everything winds.
We're finding that different manufacturers with slightly different concepts have got a different noise. So it's
Interesting.
starting to separate off where you'll be able to identify an Audi relative to something else.
Alan, thank you again so much.
Hey, pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank
you
you.
very much, and don't worry, we'll give you a shout.
Suffice to say, it's going to be a little while before Formula E cars are quicker around the track than Formula One, but that's okay. The series has only been around for 5 years, and frankly, faster cars don't necessarily equal better racing. But more importantly, I actually like the direction that Formula E is headed, and I can't say the same about a lot of the recent decisions from the Formula One organizers. So as a lifetime F1 fan, it pains me to say it, this really is the future of motorsport.